The morning sun peeked through the pink butterfly curtains as a little girl sat on her bed, hugging her favorite teddy bear close to her chest. She was only 7, with bright eyes that used to sparkle with joy, but lately something had changed. Her small fingers clutched the worn teddy bear tighter as she heard footsteps approaching her room. "Sweetie, it's time for breakfast," her mom called out, poking her head through the doorway. The girl didn't jump up with her usual excitement. Instead, she just nodded quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor. "My body hurts, Mom," she whispered, something she'd been saying more and more lately. Her mother walked over, concern etched on her face, and gently placed a hand on her daughter's forehead. No fever, just like all the other times. Life had changed a lot for them in the past few months. After 3 years of being just the two of them, her mom had gotten remarried. The little girl remembered the wedding day. Her mom looked so happy in her white dress, and her new stepdad had given her a silver bracelet with tiny butterflies on it. She'd been excited about having a dad again, just like her friends at school. But things felt different now. The house that once echoed with her laughter had grown quieter. She stopped running around the backyard where she used to spend hours on her swing set. Even her collection of stuffed animals, usually arranged perfectly on her bed, lay scattered on the floor these days. At school, her teacher noticed the changes too. The bright student who once raised her hand for every question now sat silently at her desk, drawing pictures with dark colors during art time. Her best friend kept asking why she didn't want to play tag during recess anymore. Her mom tried everything she could think of. They visited the doctor twice, but he said it was probably just growing pains. "Kids her age go through this," he explained with a reassuring smile. But something in her mother's heart wouldn't accept that simple answer. During dinner times, which used to be filled with stories about school and silly jokes, the little girl barely touched her favorite foods. She pushed her mac and cheese around the plate, stealing glances at her stepdad when she thought no one was looking. The changes were subtle at first, so subtle that they were easy to dismiss. A wince when someone moved too quickly. The way she started wearing long sleeves even on warm days. How she began asking to sleep with her bedroom light on, something she hadn't done since she was 4. Her mom noticed other small things too. The way her daughter's hands trembled slightly when her stepdad offered to help her with homework. How she stopped wanting to watch movies in the living room during their usual family movie nights, preferring to stay in her room instead. The sound of her crying softly at night when she thought everyone was asleep. Each morning became a struggle. "My tummy hurts," she'd say one day. "My arms are sore," the next. Always different pains, always without any visible cause. Her mother bought vitamins, tried different foods, even got her a new mattress, but nothing seemed to help. The little girl who once loved showing off her dance moves to anyone who would watch now moved carefully, as if trying not to be noticed. Her paintings, once full of rainbows and smiling suns, turned into scribbles of gray and black. The change wasn't just physical. It was as if her bright spirit was slowly fading away. Yet through it all, she kept hugging that old teddy bear, whispering secrets into its worn fur that she wouldn't share with anyone else. And each time she said, "My body hurts," her eyes held a message that her words couldn't express, a plea that her mother was only beginning to understand. As the days passed, the distance between mother and daughter grew smaller, while the shadow over their home grew larger. Something was terribly wrong in their once happy household, and soon the truth would come to light in a way that would change their lives forever. The mother sat at her kitchen table one morning, hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong in her home. Her daughter's words echoed in her mind, "My body hurts." Such simple words, yet they carried a weight that grew heavier with each passing day. She thought back to how things used to be just 6 months ago. Her little girl would burst into the kitchen every morning, hair messy from sleep, but eyes bright with excitement for the day ahead. Now she had to coax her daughter out of her room, and those bright eyes had turned dull and watchful. The changes had been so gradual that at first they were easy to dismiss. A cancelled playdate here, a skipped dance class there. But now, looking back, she could see how each small change had built up into something that couldn't be ignored. Her daughter, once so full of life and laughter, had become like a shadow of herself. Yesterday, while doing laundry, she noticed her daughter's favorite yellow dress stuffed at the bottom of the hamper. The same dress she used to twirl in for hours was now treated like something to hide. When asked about it, her daughter just shrugged and whispered, "I don't like yellow anymore." But her voice trembled as she said it. The mother's concerns grew stronger during dinner times. Her daughter, who used to chat endlessly about school and friends, now pushed food around her plate in silence. But it was the way she flinched whenever her stepdad reached across the table that made the mother's heart race with worry. Those tiny movements spoke volumes. At bedtime, the ritual had changed too. Her daughter now insisted on sleeping with not just one night light, but two. "The shadows look scary," she'd say, but her eyes seemed to be watching for something more real than shadows. The teddy bear that used to sit on her shelf now never left her arms, becoming a shield of sorts. The mother had tried talking to her friends about it, but they all said the same thing. Kids go through phases, but this felt different. This wasn't just a phase. The way her daughter's hands shook when her stepdad offered to read her a bedtime story, how she'd make excuses to stay at school longer on days when mom worked late, these weren't normal changes. One afternoon, while picking her up from school, the mother noticed her daughter hiding behind her friends when her stepdad came to the car instead. "I thought you were coming," she had said, her voice small and frightened. The drive home was silent, filled with tension that no child should know. Sleep became a luxury for the mother. She'd lie awake at night, listening to the quiet sounds of her house, startling at every creak and footstep. Sometimes she'd hear her daughter crying softly through the walls, but when she'd check on her, the little girl would pretend to be asleep, clutching her teddy bear with white knuckles. The breaking point came during a regular Sunday morning. They were all sitting at the breakfast table when her daughter accidentally spilled some juice. Before anyone could react, she burst into tears and ran from the room, apologizing over and over. It wasn't the spill that bothered the mother, it was the pure terror in her daughter's eyes, as if she expected something far worse than a simple cleanup. That night, after tucking her daughter in, the mother sat in the living room alone, looking at family photos on the wall. In every recent picture, she could now see what she'd missed before. Her daughter's smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. She stood further away from her stepdad in each photo, and her poses had changed from carefree to guarded. The mother's hand trembled as she picked up her phone and began searching online. Signs of abuse in children. What to do if you suspect something is wrong. How to protect your child. Each article she read made her stomach twist more tightly. The signs were all there, written in black and white, matching her daughter's behavior like a terrible puzzle finally coming together. A sound from upstairs made her freeze. Footsteps in the hallway, a door quietly opening and closing. Her daughter's words rang in her ears once more, "My body hurts." And suddenly, the mother knew, really knew, that the time for doubt was over. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she would act. The laundry basket felt heavier than usual that afternoon as the mother carried it up the stairs. Maybe it was the weight of her worries rather than the clothes themselves. She'd been doing this simple household task when her world started to crack open, revealing the terrible truth she'd been trying not to see. It started with a small blue sweater, her daughter's favorite. As she folded it, something caught her eye. Strange marks on the inside of the sleeves, as if someone had grabbed them too tightly. Her hands began to shake as she went through the rest of the clothes, finding more signs that something was terribly wrong. She remembered how just last week, during bath time, her daughter had refused to change her clothes with the door open, something she'd never done before. "I'm a big girl now," she'd said, but her voice quivered with fear rather than pride. Now, sitting among scattered clothes, the mother understood why. The sound of the school bus pulling up outside snapped her out of her thoughts. She quickly wiped her tears and went downstairs to greet her daughter. The little girl walked in slowly, her backpack seeming to weigh her down like a heavy stone. Her eyes darted around the room, checking who was home. "It's just us," the mother said softly, watching how her daughter's shoulders relaxed slightly at these words. "Would you like a snack? I made those cookies you used to love." She noticed how she had to say used to now, another change in her once happy child. They sat at the kitchen table, the plate of cookies between them untouched. The mother reached out slowly and placed her hand near her daughter's, not touching, just offering comfort. "Sweetheart," she began, her voice gentle, "you know you can tell me anything, right? Anything at all." The little girl stayed at the cookies, her lower lip trembling. She pulled her sleeves down over her hands, a habit she'd developed recently. The mother noticed how her daughter's fingers twisted the fabric, wringing it like she was trying to wring out words she couldn't say. "My teacher asked about my drawing today," the little girl whispered suddenly. The mother waited, her heart pounding. "I drew our house, but I made it dark." She asked why there were no windows. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I told her it's because the light hurts sometimes." The mother felt her throat tighten. She remembered the pile of recent drawings she'd found. Houses with no windows, black scribbles covering colorful backgrounds, stick figures standing far apart from each other. The art teacher had mentioned concerns during the last parent meeting, but the mother had dismissed them then. "Does anything else hurt?" The mother asked carefully, thinking of all the times her daughter had complained of mysterious pains. The little girl clutched her teddy bear closer. She'd started taking it everywhere now, even to school, despite being teased about it. Suddenly, a car door slammed outside. The little girl jumped so violently she knocked over her glass of milk. I'm sorry," she cried, frantically trying to clean it up with her sleeves. The mother's heart broke watching her daughter's panic over such a small accident. "It's okay, sweetie," she soothed, helping clean up. But her daughter kept apologizing, tears streaming down her face. The mother noticed how her little hands were shaking, how she kept glancing at the front door. The sound of keys in the lock made her daughter freeze completely. That evening, after her daughter was in bed, the mother sat in the dark kitchen. She could hear footsteps upstairs, her husband checking on her daughter, he'd said. But now those footsteps made her blood run cold. She thought about the bruises she'd seen, the way her daughter flinched at sudden movements, how she begged not to be left alone with her stepdad. Everything was falling into place like a horrible jigsaw puzzle. The mysterious body aches, the nightmares, the sudden fear of the dark and of the light. Her daughter's words echoed in her mind. "My body hurts." 3 simple words that held so much pain, so much truth. The mother's hands clenched into fists. Tomorrow, she decided, she would take her daughter to the doctor again. But this time, she wouldn't accept simple explanations about growing pains. This time, she would make them look closer, make them see what she had been too afraid to see herself. She pulled out her phone and began taking notes of everything she'd observed, every small change, every sign she'd ignored. As she wrote, her tears fell onto the screen, but her resolve grew stronger. The truth was ugly, but facing it was the only way to protect her child. Tomorrow would be the beginning of the end of this nightmare. The parent-teacher conference room felt smaller than usual that afternoon. The mother sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her handbag clutched tightly in her lap, as her daughter's teacher spread out several papers on the desk between them. The bright fluorescent lights made everything seem harsh and too real. "I wanted to show you these," the teacher said quietly, laying out her daughter's recent artwork. The progression was striking and disturbing. The first drawings from the beginning of the year showed a happy family, stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. But as the weeks went on, the pictures changed. The mother's hands trembled as she picked up the most recent drawing. The paper was almost entirely covered in black crayon, with a small figure huddled in the corner. No sun, no smiles, no family members holding hands, just darkness and a lonely child. "She's always been such a bright student," the teacher continued, her voice filled with concern. "But lately, she barely participates in class. Yesterday, during story time, we read a book about family, and she started crying. When I asked what was wrong, she just kept saying she didn't feel well." The mother remembered how often her daughter had been saying those words lately. "I don't feel well. My stomach hurts. My arms hurt. Always different pains, always without any visible cause. Or at least, that's what she had thought." The teacher pulled out another paper, a writing assignment from last week. The topic was my happy place, she explained. Most kids wrote about the playground or their bedrooms. Your daughter? She paused, pushing the paper forward. She wrote about the school library. She said it's the only place where she feels safe. Those last words hit the mother like a physical blow. Safe. Her 7-year-old daughter didn't feel safe in her own home. The realization made her feel sick to her stomach. "There's something else," the teacher said hesitantly. During recess, she started hiding in the reading corner instead of playing with her friends. When other children invite her to join their games, she says she's too tired or sore to play. But I've noticed. The teacher lowered her voice. She watches the clock constantly, especially near the end of the day. She seems terrified of going home. The mother's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She thought about how her daughter had begged to stay late for non-existent school projects, how she'd made up excuses to visit the school nurse just to avoid going home. Just then, her phone buzzed, a text from her husband saying he'd pick up her daughter today since she was at the conference. The mother's blood ran cold. She hadn't told him about this meeting. She quickly texted back that she'd get their daughter herself, making up an excuse about already being near the school. As she gathered her things to leave, the teacher gently touched her arm. "There's one more thing," she said, pulling out a note from her desk drawer. "Your daughter wrote this during free writing time. She asked me not to read it, but," the teacher's voice cracked slightly, "I heard her crying as she wrote it." The folded paper felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in the mother's hands. She opened it carefully, her heart pounding. In her daughter's wobbly handwriting were the words, "Dear Mom, I'm scared. He comes into my room at night. Please make it stop." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The mother gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. All the signs she'd tried to ignore, all the excuses she'd made, they all came crashing down around her. Her daughter's voice echoed in her head, "My body hurts." Now she understood the full weight of those words. She checked her watch. School would be letting out in 10 minutes. Her daughter would be waiting, watching the clock like the teacher said, dreading what came next. But today would be different. Today, everything would change. As she rushed to her car, the mother's mind was already racing ahead. She needed to get her daughter, needed to keep her safe. They wouldn't be going home, not today, not ever again. She could see things clearly now, too clearly, and there was no going back to pretending everything was fine. The school bell rang in the distance as she pulled into the parking lot. Her hands were steady now, her purpose clear. Her daughter had been silently screaming for help all this time, and finally, she was ready to hear it. Today would be the day she saved her child. That evening started like any other, but there was a different energy in the air. The mother's hands shook slightly as she prepared dinner, her mind racing with plans. She'd made several quiet phone calls that afternoon, to a women's shelter, to a lawyer, to her sister who lived 2 states away. Everything was ready. Her daughter sat at the kitchen table, homework spread out before her, but her pencil hadn't moved in minutes. She kept glancing at the clock, then the front door, then back to her untouched math problems. The mother noticed how her little girl's shoulders tensed at every sound from outside. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" the mother asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Her daughter nodded slightly, clutching her teddy bear closer. The mother had packed 2 small bags earlier, hidden them in the trunk of her car. Just a few essential items, enough to get them through the next few days. The rest didn't matter. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made them both freeze. The mother watched as her daughter's face went pale, her small hands gripping the teddy bear so tight her knuckles turned white. "I'm not feeling well," the little girl whispered, her usual words, but tonight they carried a different weight. "Go up to your room, sweetheart," the mother said softly. "I'll bring your hot chocolate up in a minute." She watched as her daughter practically ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time despite her usual complaints about body aches. The front door opened and heavy footsteps entered the house. The mother busied herself in the kitchen, her heart pounding but her movements deliberate. Her husband's keys clattered on the counter and she felt him move behind her. "Where's my favorite girl?" he asked, and the mother felt her stomach turn at the false cheerfulness in his voice. "She's not feeling well," the mother replied, gripping the kitchen counter. "She's resting upstairs." She heard him start to move toward the stairs, and her whole body tensed. "I'll check on her," he said, and something in his tone made her blood run cold. The mother waited until his footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Then she moved, quietly but quickly, following him up. She heard her daughter's door open, heard the familiar creak of floorboards, and then her daughter's frightened whimper. Something snapped inside her at that sound. All the fear, all the doubt, all the desperate need to believe everything was fine, it all disappeared in an instant. In its place came a surge of protective fury that gave her strength she didn't know she had. She burst through the door, and the scene before her confirmed every terrible suspicion. Her husband stood over her daughter's bed, while the little girl pressed herself against the wall, terror written across her face. "Get away from her!" the mother screamed, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. The next few moments were a blur of action. She grabbed her daughter, pushing past her stunned husband. Her phone was already in her hand, 911 dialed before she even reached the hallway. She pulled her daughter into the bathroom, the only room with a strong lock, and barricaded them inside. "Help is coming, baby," she whispered, holding her trembling daughter close. "Nobody's going to hurt you anymore, I promise." She could hear banging on the door, angry shouts from outside, but she focused on her daughter's face, wiping away tears with gentle hands. Her daughter looked up at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. "You came," she whispered, as if she'd been waiting for this moment forever. "You hurt me." The mother's heart broke and mended all at once. Yes, she had finally heard, not just the words, but everything behind them. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The mother held her daughter tighter, feeling her small heart racing. "I'm so sorry it took me so long to understand," she murmured into her daughter's hair. "But I'm here now, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you again." The sound of police officers entering the house, their authoritative voices calling out, was the sweetest sound she ever heard. Her daughter's grip on her loosened slightly, just a fraction, but enough to show that she felt it too. The first breath of freedom, the first moment of feeling truly safe. As they heard handcuffs clicking shut and rights being read, the mother looked down at her brave little girl. "Does your body still hurt?" she asked softly. Her daughter shook her head, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "Not anymore," she whispered. "Not now that you know." The bathroom door vibrated with a gentle knock, a female officer's voice identifying herself. The nightmare was ending. As the mother stood to unlock the door, she kept one arm firmly around her daughter. They would face whatever came next together, stronger for having broken their silence, safer for having found their courage. The police station was quiet this early in the morning. The mother sat in a small room with soft blue walls, designed to be comforting but still feeling sterile and strange. Her daughter dozed in her lap, exhausted from the events of the night, still clutching her teddy bear. A kind-faced female detective sat across from them, speaking in gentle tones. She explained what would happen next: the investigation, the legal process, the support services available to them. The mother stroked her daughter's hair as she listened, trying to absorb every detail while fighting her own exhaustion. "You did the right thing," the detective said softly, watching as the little girl shifted in her sleep. "Many people wait much longer or never speak up at all." The mother looked down at her daughter's peaceful face, finally relaxed in sleep, and felt both profound relief and crushing guilt. "I should have known sooner," she whispered, tears threatening to fall. "All those times she told me her body hurt." The detective reached across the table, placing a warm hand over the mother's trembling ones. "You're here now," she said firmly. "That's what matters. And we're going to make sure you both get all the help you need." She slid across a card for a child psychologist who specialized in trauma cases. "She's expecting your call. She's one of the best." Later that morning, they arrived at her sister's house, where they would stay for the next few weeks. The small guest room felt like a sanctuary after the chaos of the night. Her daughter looked around curiously at the unfamiliar space, still holding her mother's hand tightly. "Can we put up my butterfly lights?" she asked in a small voice, referring to the string lights they'd grabbed during their hurried packing. The mother's heart swelled. It was the first time in months her daughter had asked for something she wanted. "Of course we can, sweetheart," she replied, already reaching for the bag. Together, they hung the lights around the room, creating a soft, warm glow. It was a tiny piece of normal in their upturned world, but it felt immensely important. The next few days passed in a blur of police interviews, meetings with lawyers, and quiet conversations with victim advocates. The mother was amazed by the network of support that seemed to materialize around them. People she'd never met were working tirelessly to help them, to make sure justice would be served. The hardest part was watching her daughter tell her story to the child psychologist. The mother sat outside the room, hearing her little girl's voice shake as she finally put words to her pain. But with each session, that voice grew stronger. The psychologist used play therapy, art therapy, and gentle conversation to help her daughter process what had happened. "Your daughter is incredibly resilient," the psychologist told her after one session. "She held on to hope that you would help her, and you did. That's going to be crucial for her healing." The mother held on to those words like a lifeline. The legal process moved forward. Her husband remained in custody, denied bail due to the nature of the charges. Each time the mother had to appear in court, her sister stayed with her daughter, creating a safe space filled with crafts, books, and quiet understanding. One evening, as they sat together on the guest room bed, her daughter looked up from her coloring book. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "will we ever go home?" The mother pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "We'll find a new home," she promised. "One where you'll always feel safe." Her daughter nodded, returning to her coloring. The page showed a bright garden full of butterflies, no more dark scribbles or windowless houses. The mother started attending a support group for parents of traumatized children. Sitting in a circle with other mothers and fathers who understood her pain, her guilt, her fierce determination to help her child heal. It gave her strength she didn't know she needed. Recovery isn't linear, the group leader often reminded them. There will be good days and hard days. The important thing is to keep moving forward. The mother wrote these words in her journal, along with every small sign of progress she noticed in her daughter. Small victories began to accumulate. Her daughter slept through the night without nightmares. She agreed to join her cousin for a playdate. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Each moment felt like a precious gift, a step toward healing. The preliminary hearing date was set, but the prosecutor warned them it could be months before the actual trial. The mother didn't care how long it took. Justice would come. For now, her focus was on helping her daughter feel safe, loved, and heard. "My body doesn't hurt anymore," her daughter told her one night as they hung up new drawings on their temporary bedroom wall. The mother hugged her close, tears in her eyes. Those words, once a cry for help, had become a declaration of healing. They still had a long way to go, but they would walk the path together, one day at a time. 2 years had passed since that life-changing night. The mother stood in the doorway of their new apartment, watching her daughter twirl in front of the mirror in her dance outfit. The morning sun caught the sequins on her costume, sending little rainbow reflections dancing across the walls. "I'm ready for my recital," her daughter announced, doing one final spin. The mother smiled, remembering how long it had taken to get to this point. There had been so many small steps, so many quiet victories that led to this moment. Their new home was smaller than their old house, but it felt infinitely bigger in all the ways that mattered. The walls were painted in bright colors chosen by her daughter, sunshine yellow in the living room, sky blue in her bedroom. Every window had light, airy curtains that let in plenty of sunshine. The trial had ended 6 months ago. Justice had been served, with her ex-husband receiving a long sentence. But more important than the legal victory was the healing they'd achieved together. The mother had watched her daughter transform from a frightened, hurt child back into the bright, confident girl she was meant to be. Their morning routine had changed completely. No more fearful glances or whispered complaints of pain. Now, her daughter bounced out of bed each morning, eager to start the day. She'd made new friends at her new school, joined the dance club, and even started taking art classes at the community center. "Look what I made in therapy yesterday," her daughter said, pulling a painting from her backpack. It showed 2 figures, mother and daughter, standing under a rainbow. Both figures were smiling, their hands reaching toward a flock of butterflies. The mother felt tears in her eyes as she remembered the dark, windowless houses her daughter used to draw. The therapy sessions had become less frequent now, but they still went regularly. Their therapist had become like family, celebrating every milestone with them. "Healing isn't just about getting over the bad things," she often said. "It's about building something new and beautiful from what remains." And they had built something beautiful. The mother had started volunteering at a local crisis center, using her experience to help other families in similar situations. Her daughter sometimes came with her, helping to sort donated toys and books. "We're turning our hurt into help," her daughter had said one day, showing wisdom beyond her years. Their support group still met every month, though now the mother found herself offering advice more often than seeking it. "Trust your instincts," she would tell new members. "Listen to your children, even when they can only speak through their silence." That morning, as they drove to the dance recital, her daughter chatted excitedly about her routine. The mother glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing not just her daughter's bright smile, but also the strength that lay beneath it. The strength that had been there all along, waiting to be recognized and protected. At the community center, other parents and children gathered for the recital. Her daughter ran off to join her dance group, confident and happy. The mother found her seat, placing the bouquet of pink roses, her daughter's favorite, on her lap. The lights dimmed and the music started. When her daughter stepped onto the stage, the mother felt her heart swell with pride. There was no trace of the old fear in her movements. She danced with joy, with freedom, with the pure happiness of a child who felt completely safe. After the performance, as they walked to their favorite ice cream shop to celebrate, her daughter skipped ahead, still wearing her dance costume. "Mom," she called back, "remember when I used to say my body hurt all the time?" The mother's heart caught for a moment, but she nodded. "I remember, sweetheart." Her daughter twirled around, the sequins on her costume catching the sunlight. "Now my body only hurts when I dance too much," she said with a giggle. "But it's a good hurt, like growing stronger." That night, as the mother tucked her daughter into bed, she noticed all the signs of healing around them. The nightlight was smaller now, more for comfort than necessity. The teddy bear still had a place of honor on the bed, but it was surrounded by other stuffed animals, each one a celebration of some small victory. "I love you, Mom," her daughter said sleepily. "Thank you for saving us." The mother kissed her forehead, remembering how far they'd come. "We saved each other," she whispered. As she turned out the light, leaving the door open just a crack the way her daughter liked it, the mother felt a deep sense of peace. They had transformed their story from one of pain to one of triumph. Their experience had become a beacon of hope for others, proving that with love, courage, and support, healing was always possible. The butterfly lights twinkled softly in the darkness, casting gentle shadows on the wall. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new victories, new moments of joy. But for now, in this quiet moment, they were simply mother and daughter, safe, loved, and free from hurt at last.